Welcome to Namaste Today, the joyful way to start your day. I'm your host and spiritual life coach, Sensei Christopher Witecki, and this is your audio blogcast for Tuesday, December 6th, 2016. Namaste. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to my daily blogcast. I have these blogcasts Monday through Friday. Yesterday I released my video blogcast, so if you didn't catch that, be sure to check it out. It is the entire week summarized with your moods and also talking about the week's goal. And I believe this week's goal is to decide and commit to what we believe. Well, today things are going to ease up a bit. I have to admit the energy in the last few days really hasn't been that appealing to me. Even though I'm happy to be in Denver and happy to have things changing my life, the vibration on Earth has been frankly kind of icky and not so much fun. But I think today things are going to start to feel a little better, partly due to the moon in Pisces and partly due to the sun at step 15. Now, step 15 means the 15th degree in Sagittarius, which means we are officially halfway through this Sagittarius transit. And if you don't know, Sagittarius is all about what we believe. And what we believe is a powerful thing if you come from a creationist perspective, because if you believe it, then you can create it. And I literally believe that belief comes down to our hearts knowing that we can pull it off. But you know, we get caught up in other circumstances, evidence, credit ratings, money, lots of things that are kind of in hard fact reality. And it sometimes keeps us from believing. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about leaving room for God to write. I don't know if you ever heard that term, but I went to film school, many film schools actually, and took a lot of screenwriting classes. And they always had this little saying of leaving room for the writer to write. In other words, don't try to be so critical that it doesn't seem plausible. Well, the same is kind of true, I think, with the universe. And that's what I want to talk about today. Although we're halfway through the sun in Sagittarius and we're ready to believe that our life will work out. We're ready to believe that our relationships will work out. We're ready to believe that our money situation will work out. We're having a hard time believing, not because of the Sagittarius energy, but I think because of the trifecta going on in Capricorn. That is, we have 3 planets right now in Capricorn: Mercury, Pluto, and Venus. And Capricorn is the rock. It is the rules. It is the way things are done. And so I literally think that we're having a little bit of a tug of war, coming into peace in our hearts about what we believe, not because we don't believe it, but just because nothing in our evidence or the rules says it's even possible. And this is where I say we got to leave room for God to write here. Things do change if you hold space for the possibility. And I'm going to have a couple headlines to talk about that. But first, let's talk about this trifecta in Capricorn. Pluto, which is basically, I'm not just how to describe it. Pluto is ground zero in astrology. Wherever Pluto is, it tells us astrologers, this is ground zero. This is where human beings have to change and grow up right now, or else, okay? And or else means death, literally. They say change or die. So Pluto is 16 degrees in Capricorn. That's more than halfway. It just recently got to 16. It basically has been fooling around at 15 all year long. That's how slow Pluto moves. But finally, Pluto's at 16, which means when it comes to the ground zero of what we need to change, we're now more than halfway through Capricorn. Now, in the first part of Capricorn, I think it all had to do with rules we should know better about, okay? So this was rules about, our stock market and getting bailing out our economy and all sorts of financial, the house loaning scandals that happened with mortgages. All of that was the lower Pluto and Capricorn degrees of, basically people taking advantage of rules and finance, people getting caught with laws, issues with the law, about policing too many people, or, any type of looking at the lower half of our society has been Pluto up until now. Now that Pluto is 16 degrees and now I'll move above, We're going to look at rewriting the zero line of rules about our high functioning rules. And our high functioning rules are, for instance, are we a socialistic democracy? Are we a democracy that that works in socialistic ways? What is the difference between us and communism in modern society in this economic world? What rules really are in effect? So Pluto at 16 says that we're going to start rewriting the rules. I just want to lay that out there for you because I think it's important when it comes to believing. A lot of things that people are believing right now and coming into your hearts about are things you want to believe, but you just can't see it happening in the world you have seen so far. And what Pluto at 16 is saying is, it's not going to be the world you have seen so far. The rules are going to change. And you may say, how is this possible? Well, first of all, I just want to throw out there before I give my examples that in your personal life, in your personal beliefs, you're going to have to suspend and give God room to write for the rules to change. Okay? That's what's going to have to be out there. And you might have to do that today. You might have to say to yourself, something's going to have to change. I don't know what it is, but I'm just going to kind of give myself some space for that. After which, you have to stand back and allow things to happen. Now, here's my proof. First of all, did you ever think Donald Trump would make it as president? Okay, there you go. Boom, the rules have changed. There's one big rule that's changed. But I'll give you another interesting rule that just came up in the headlines, which I think is actually a good thing. The FDA has just approved for a third trial run MDMA for help with PTSD. So basically, MDMA, if you don't know, is ecstasy in the party market. In fact, kids have been using this drug and abusing this drug for literally, I think, 20 years now in the United States. And the drug was actually originally created for vets returning from war to kind of reopen up their pleasure centers and reopen them up to love again. And of course, as you know, with all this Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan deployments, our soldiers have been coming back really screwed up and really having a very hard time with post-traumatic stress syndrome in a horrible way. And it's something that we haven't really paid attention to. Now, I'll tell you, in the world I grew up with, the day that the FDA is approving ecstasy for vets, I just could never see that. That is the rules being totally broken. Okay, so there's an example of Pluto at 16. We're going to start to break some of the high level rules in our life. Another example came out this week in the press too, kind of ironically, but interesting, is that they have found in other medical programs, I don't want to say experiment, sounds like you're experimenting on people, but trials where basically the active ingredient of magic mushrooms, okay, so it's basically tripping on mushrooms, was used for people with cancer. And these people actually improved dramatically their fears over cancer and the side of death and the possibility of death. It's called psilocybin. They took basically a pharmaceutical version of it. But basically you have a clinical trial here where cancer patients are tripping on a medical acid, okay, in order to face their fears. And I actually saw one of the ladies in an interview on one of the news programs, whatever you call it, news, talking about it. And she literally said, I could visualize my fears, and I told it to go away. So she literally had some sort of a psychedelic kind of thing where she talked to her fears literally, and her consciousness went with it. So why do I bring this up? Well, Sensei Chris says, because this is another thing I would have never thought would change when it comes to the rules, all right? Now we are looking at psychedelics, which goes back to our native times, as possibilities for curing something of cancer, which is actually more of a modern creation, I think, from environments and the pollutants and whatnot. So how does this relate to you? Well, my friend, as you are now looking towards the week to try to believe that there's a solution for your marriage, or believe that there's a solution for your job, or whatever it is you're trying to believe in right now in your life, recognize that we're in an interesting and profound time right now where human beings are willing to change the rules. And that's the one thing you're probably not considering when you ask yourself if you believe? Are you considering the fact that the rules might change and something may just fall out of the sky? And that's the last little piece I'll bring to you today, is the moon in Pisces. It is time to now act on compassion and put it into action. In other words, allow Spirit to take over, give God the room to write, find the path of least resistance, and just see if the rules don't change. And just so you know, as far as rule changing schedule is concerned, it's going to take the rest of this year into January 9th or so when Mercury goes direct before I think we'll see evidence of changed rules. But I do believe that we're about to see a lot of rules change. All right, my friend, that's all I have for your little Tuesday audio blogcast here. While you're out there finding peace in your heart, keep an open mind, give God the room to write, and remember that I love you and live, love, be.
Live, love, be.